Carvacrol, a phenolic compound so structurally potent that a 2019 study in the journal Frontiers in Microbiology found it disrupting the cell membranes of antibiotic-resistant Staphylococcus aureus at concentrations you can realistically achieve with 2 drops of high-quality oregano oil, is sitting on your kitchen shelf right now, slowly evaporating into nothing because the jar it's in is probably dried, commercial, and 8 months old. And dried commercial oregano has already lost 60 to 70% of its volatile compounds before it ever reaches the store. There's a reason ancient Egyptians used oregano as both a food preservative and a treatment for infected wounds. And by the end of this, you'll understand the exact molecular reason that makes complete biological sense. But first, you need to understand what's actually inside this plant, because it's not a spice, it's a pharmacy. And there are 4 specific preparation mistakes that reduce it back to a spice. By the end of this, you'll know exactly which form of oregano actually delivers its active compounds into your body, which preparation method destroys them entirely, and the one ancient application modern science just confirmed after 3,000 years. Okay, so let's start where most people are. You probably think of oregano as the thing that makes tomato sauce smell like tomato sauce. Maybe you've heard it's high in antioxidants. Maybe your grandmother made oregano tea when you had a cold and you weren't sure if that was medicine or just something she believed. Here's the thing. Your grandmother was correct. She just didn't have the vocabulary for why. What she was actually doing was delivering a cascade of phenolic compounds directly into an inflamed respiratory system. And the science on that is now genuinely extraordinary. Oregano, Origanum vulgar, contains at least 7 distinct active compounds that work simultaneously and synergistically. Carvacrol and thymol are the primary phenolics, the ones that get the most research attention. Rosmarinic acid is a potent antioxidant that's also been studied for its anti-inflammatory effects in ways that go significantly beyond basic free radical scavenging. Then there are flavonoids, quercetin, myricetin, and apigenin, each with their own biological targets, and osamine, a volatile terpene that contributes to the herb's antimicrobial profile and also happens to be part of why the aroma itself has measurable physiological effects. This is not a list of marketing terms. These are distinct molecules doing distinct work at the cellular level right now in the oregano you've been treating as a pizza topping. Think about free radicals this way. Imagine them as sparks inside your cells, not metaphorical sparks, actual reactive oxygen species that left unchecked oxidize your cellular machinery the way rust oxidizes iron. Rosmarinic acid and the flavonoids in oregano are essentially fireproof coating. They neutralize those sparks before they reach anything vital. Rosmarinic acid specifically has a higher antioxidant activity than vitamin E in certain assay models, which, by the way, is not something you'll see on the side of a spice jar. The ORAC value of fresh oregano is one of the highest ever recorded in a common food plant, higher than blueberries, higher than dark chocolate, higher than most of the things currently being marketed as superfoods. It just isn't being marketed because it costs $2 and it already lives in your kitchen. But the antioxidant story is actually the least surprising part of this. What carvacrol does at the antibacterial level is the part that genuinely stopped me when I first read the mechanism. It's not that carvacrol blocks bacterial activity or interferes with bacterial reproduction. It physically dissolves the phospholipid bilayer that forms the outer membrane of certain bacteria. It inserts itself into the lipid structure of that wall and disrupts it at the molecular level. Think of it as something that doesn't just kill the bacteria, it collapses the building they live inside. And it does this to some of the organisms we are currently running out of pharmaceutical options against. A 2012 study published in the Journal of Medicinal Food found oregano oil demonstrating activity against 20 strains of bacteria, including antibiotic-resistant strains. Research out of the United Arab Emirates University showed carvacrol-containing extracts outperforming standard antibiotics against certain bacterial isolates in vitro. Now, and this is important, in vitro means in a lab dish, not inside a human body where bioavailability and pharmacokinetics are a whole other conversation. But the mechanism is real, the compounds are real, and they're the same compounds you could be delivering in meaningful concentrations if you were using this herb correctly, which almost nobody is. And we'll get to that preparation method in a moment because that part. So let's talk preparation, because this is where most people are unknowingly destroying everything we just discussed. Commercial dried oregano, the kind in a plastic jar with a red lid that's been sitting in a warehouse, then on a shelf under fluorescent lighting in fluctuating temperatures, has already undergone significant volatile compound degradation before you ever open it. Carvacrol and thymol are volatile phenolics, which means they literally evaporate. The aroma you smell when you open a jar is those compounds leaving. By the time most commercial dried oregano reaches your kitchen, the concentration of active compounds can be 60 to 70% lower than in freshly dried oregano. And if you're adding it to boiling tomato sauce at the start of cooking, you're volatilizing what remains. Here's what the chemistry tells you to do instead. First, source matters enormously. Mediterranean oregano, particularly Greek or Turkish varieties of Oreganum vulgare hirtum, contains consistently higher carvacrol concentrations than the generic Italian variety dried oregano sold in most supermarkets. Studies have measured carvacrol concentrations varying from under 1% to over 80% across different oregano subspecies and drying conditions. That range is not minor. Second, if you're using it medicinally rather than culinary, oregano oil standardized to contain at least 70% carvacrol is the only form that delivers the concentration studied in the research. Not the dried flakes, the oil. 2 drops in warm water, not boiling, warm, is the classical preparation. For topical use, it must be diluted in a carrier oil at a ratio of no more than 1 drop per teaspoon because carvacrol at full concentration will irritate skin. Third, if you are using dried oregano in cooking, add it in the final 2 to 3 minutes. At temperatures above 200 degrees Fahrenheit, carvacrol begins volatilizing rapidly. Adding it late preserves significantly more active compound. Studies suggest up to 60% higher retention compared to adding it at the start of cooking. This is all educational information, not medical advice. If you're managing any health condition, talk to your doctor before using any herbal preparation therapeutically. What I can tell you is that the preparation method matters at the molecular level, and knowing that changes how you use it. And now, the Egyptian thing. Ancient Egyptian physicians documented oregano as a wound treatment and food preservative in papyri, dating back to 1500 BCE. The preservative use specifically was intuitive chemistry that took us until the 20th century to formally explain. They were applying carvacrol's antibacterial mechanism to stop food from rotting. They didn't know about phospholipid bilayers. They observed that the herb stopped decay, documented it, and passed it forward for 3,000 years. What I find extraordinary is not that they used it, it's that they got the application exactly right without the mechanism. And the wound treatment, which was dismissed for centuries as folk practice, is now being studied in clinical context for exactly the molecular reason those physicians identified empirically. The most powerful pharmacy humans ever had was the hillside behind their house. It's still sitting in a jar on your counter. Drop a comment and tell me, which herb in your kitchen are you most certain you've been completely underestimating? Because this one was just the beginning.